Welcome back to this episode of the Mormon News Roundup. We're going to tackle one of the most enduring controversies in the Book of Mormon, the mysterious mention of horses. Horses are referenced multiple times in the text, often as part of the Nephite and Lamanite societies, suggesting their use in transportation, farming, and even warfare. Yet many scholars and archaeologists argue that horses were absent in the Americas during the periods described in the Book of Mormon. In today's brief episode, we'll look at the historical and archaeological evidence, or lack thereof, for horses in pre-Columbian America. We'll also review a few apologetic attempts to address this issue, and we'll discuss what science currently has to say about the possibility of horses existing in the Americas during the Book of Mormon times. First, let's lay out the problem. The Book of Mormon, purportedly an ancient record of peoples in the Americas, mentions horses at least 14 times. For example, in Alma chapter 18, horses are described as being prepared for King Lamoni's chariots. However, mainstream archaeology and history assert that horses became extinct in the Americas around 10,000 years ago during the Pleistocene extinction event. And that's long before the timeline of the Book of Mormon, which covers the time frame of approximately 2500 BCE to 400 CE. So the big question, of course, is if horses are absent in the Americas during that time frame, how then do they appear in the Book of Mormon narrative?
Good question.
This question has led to heated debates with defenders and critics of the faith. It's even seeped into the Mormon zeitgeist, as you can see from this clip from God's Army back in 2000.
80. 81.
What?
82.
It's nothing.
83.
Book of Mormon talks about horses in
84.
America. What?
85.
There were no horses in America before Columbus. It's pretty much a documented fact.
88.
Why are you still reading that
89.
stuff? It's as bad as pornography.
90.
How do you expect to defend yourself against these people? Man, these people are the enemy. You want to look stupid in front of them? You gotta know their weapons and their strategy.
94.
You know, you got some weird terminology there.
95.
I ought to be reading the scriptures, not this
96.
garbage.
You gotta love Richard Dutcher. Let's take a look at some of the common explanations that are put forth to explain this conundrum. Some LDS apologists claim that the word horse may not refer to the animal that we know today. They argue that Joseph Smith might have used familiar terms to describe unfamiliar animals seen in the ancient Americas, such as tapirs, deer, or llama. For example, fair Mormon apologists have posited the idea that Nephite writers could have said that any large quadruped could be called a horse.
Are you serious?
Another explanation is that a small population of wild horses may have survived past their supposed extinction, and were reintroduced to the Americas earlier than believed. Proponents of this theory point to the possibility of underdocumented trade or migration routes bringing horses back before the Spanish reintroduction in the 1500s. However, most archaeologists argue that no evidence, such as horse bones or tools clearly associated with horsemanship, have been found to support this hypothesis.
We ain't found
Some scholars have argued that the mention of horses in the Book of Mormon could be seen as symbolic or metaphorical, representing status or power rather than literal animals. This view, while creative, does not align with the straightforward descriptions of horses being used in physical tasks like chariot transport. Let's take a look at the science. Over the years, several attempts have been made to identify archaeological evidence of horses in pre-Columbian America. In 2005, a study conducted by Thomas Emerson and others analyzed bone samples that were initially believed to belong to ancient horses. Unfortunately for Mormon apologists, radiocarbon dating showed that these remains were from much earlier periods, confirming the absence of horses in Book of Mormon times. Interestingly, there have been scattered reports of horse bones dated to around 4000 BCE in locations like Canada. However, these findings remain contested, as critics argue they do not establish the existence of domesticated horses in the regions and times described in the Book of Mormon. And here's what a couple of basic textbooks say about horses in pre-Columbian America.
Most of America's big wild mammals, including its horses, most of its camels, and other species likely to have been domesticated had they survived, became extinct about 13,000 years ago. A combination of elements, including climate change and overhunting by early man, drove the American equus population to extinction between 10 and 11,000 years ago. It should be noted, the same land bridge that brought the end of the North American horses also allowed them to migrate out to the continents where they thrived.
One recent study by Dr. Lodovic Orlando, a paleontologist, explored the DNA of ancient horse remains. Orlando's work focused on identifying the genetic lineage of extinct horse populations and demonstrated that wild horses indeed roamed the Americas tens of thousands of years ago, but there's simply no genetic evidence of those horses surviving into the Nephite timeline. Defenders of the faith often point to potential gaps in the archaeological record. After all, they argue that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. LDS apologists argue that many civilizations in history have left minimal physical traces, and the destruction of organic materials over time makes it plausible that horse evidence has simply not been found yet. Additionally, some LDS thinkers suggest that small-scale horse populations could have existed in remote areas, or were used in ways that did not leave archaeological evidence. While this is theoretically possible, it remains speculative without concrete findings. The entire horse anachronism in the Book of Mormon has been the subject of much parodies. Here's one that I found that's dedicated to Dr. Dan Peterson, affectionately nicknamed Taper Dan.
In a world where horses cannot exist, an isolated people group known as the Nephites find a unique alternate form of transportation.
I'm gonna go with my instinct on this one. Saddle up, partner.
One man has found a way to domesticate a special animal and give his people the advantage in many great military battles. Kolob Pictures presents an absolute must-see film based on Western civilization's special work of religious literature, the Book of Mormon.
Hello, my name is Elder Grant. It's a book about America a long, long time ago. It has so many awesome parts. You simply won't believe how much this book can change your life.
A horse is a horse, of course, and no one can talk to a horse, of course. That is, of course, unless the horse is the famous
Tapir Whisperer. Amazing audiences everywhere, beginning this Friday.
Rated R for ridiculous.
Yeah, baby.
Over time, perspectives in the LDS community has shifted. In the early days of the church, it was often assumed that the Book of Mormon's account of horses was literal and historically accurate. Today, many members acknowledge the complexity of this issue and are open to considering the possibility of alternative explanations. In fact, some Latter-day Saints embrace the idea that the Book of Mormon may contain anachronisms, but still view it as inspired scripture. The horse controversy in the Book of Mormon is emblematic of a larger issue in Mormon studies: how to reconcile discrepancies between scripture and science. For believers, it raises questions about the nature of prophetic inspiration, the reliability of translation, and the relationship between faith and evidence. For critics, the absence of horses in the archaeological record serves as one of many challenges to the historicity of the Book of Mormon. They argue that it reflects Joseph Smith's 19th century environment rather than an ancient historical text. And here's one last attempt to spin the horse narrative in the Book of Mormon, brought to us by those folks at Scripture Central.
In the Book of Mormon, there are a handful of references to horses. This has raised questions because the current understanding is that there were no horses in the Americas before Columbus. There are three possible ways to approach the question of horses in the Book of Mormon. First, there may be evidence, though currently inconclusive, for horses in pre-Columbian America. Archaeological work unearths surprising new information all the time. Second is the chance that the Nephites borrowed the word from the Old World and applied it to a similar animal in the New World. This happens across cultures, like how the North American bison is frequently called a buffalo after the large African animal. The third is the possibility that during the translation process, the word horse was used in place of another unfamiliar word. Although there are still some unanswered questions, they can be launching pads for deeper learning as opposed to being a stumbling block. And now you know why.
So where does this leave us? The debate over Book of Mormon horses remains unresolved. While science has yet to provide definitive evidence of horses in the Americas during the Book of Mormon times, apologetic explanations such as mistranslation or gaps in the archaeological record continue to offer alternative viewpoints. Ultimately, the Book of Mormon horse controversy invites all of us to grapple with the complexities of belief and evidence. Whether you approach the Book of Mormon as literal history or inspired allegory, it's clear that this ancient text continues to inspire passionate inquiry and debate. Thanks so much for joining me on this inspired episode of the Mormon News Roundup. If you found this discussion enlightening, be sure to subscribe, like, and turn on notifications. And be sure to let me know in the comments. What do you think of Book of Mormon horses? Are they a glaring anachronism, or could there be an explanation that we've overlooked? Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and stay curious.